How are you? Let me
I'm
just
good.
push you to the other screen. I'm also going to put the camera so you can see everybody, okay?
Cool. All right.
Give me a second.
Ooh, nice. So many shoes.
I know, right? Fantastic.
Hey, look at that crew.
Looks like I need a little bit of height.
It's a nice space.
You can see it? Good?
Yeah, it's great.
Yep.
Everyone say hi.
Hey.
Okay, guys, so I'm going to ask you to maybe like introduce yourselves a little bit. A little bit of who you are and why the hell you would speak with us. So, shoot.
Sure. Sure. So I'm Sam. This is Seth. We're brothers and co-founders of Butterscotch Shenanigans. We are a cross-platform video game studio based out of the Midwest in the United States.
Sorry.
And we're bootstrapped, so we didn't take any investment or anything like that. We're a small business, and we're also a brother-owned company. So our third brother is the only person who's missing from this today. But we've made 5 games so far, and one of which launched cross-platform onto PC, and it was called Crashlands, and that one launched last January, and has since sold, I think, over 400,000 units across all 3 storefronts. Got us a Mobile Game of the Year award from Touch Arcade, as well as Editor's Choice on the various storefronts, and we got a DICE nomination for Best Mobile Game of the Year as well. So nowadays we're doing, working on growing our studio and figuring out kind of what the next game looks like, and that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, that's incredible, guys. I'm going to start off with a few questions, as I spoke before, and then anytime, if anyone has a question, feel free, okay? Just speak or just put your hand up and ask a question away, okay? So first of all, could you tell us a little bit of your story? So how do you get here? How do you get into game development and found this studio here?
Sure.
Yeah, so I started as a finance student. I became a financial analyst. Then I went to law school, and I was incredibly bored, so I started tinkering around, teaching myself how to code. And my dream was always to make games, but I never knew how. We're from a small town of 10,000 people. There's no games industry around where we grew up to speak of, so we had no sort of concept of what it means to even get started making games. So in law school, I started playing around with Game Maker, which is a game development platform for 2D games. And I was just completely enthralled by being able to, make a character and have it move around on the screen and stuff. And so I started using that and learning it to make bigger and bigger projects. Eventually, Sam and I, so Sam was going to college for psychology. And eventually, he and I teamed up and did a game jam, which you guys are probably pretty well familiar with.
I hope so.
Yeah, so we did a game jam, and we made something that kind of surprised both of us, just in terms of the quality of the thing we were able to put together. And so at that moment, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, we could probably do this. So then we kind of just set down a path where we both got a job at a larger game studio, which we worked at for about 8 months, and we scrimped and saved as much as we could till we had about a 6-month cash pile at the bank. And from there, we just went ahead and tried to make as many games as we could before our money ran out. So we ended up, our first game was Towel Fight 2, which kind of was a disaster.
Yeah.
It received positive reviews from critics and stuff, but it ended up making us negative $8,000. So not
a good first title, I think.
Yeah, it took us about 3 months to make. And then our second game was another 3-month project, which we switched to free play for that one. We were making mobile games at the time. And that one actually started bringing in not a lot of money, but enough that we were able to kind of, keep the lights on and pay some rent, supplemented by very supportive spouses and stuff like that. So, so that's kind of how we got. And after that, we started working on Crashlands, which was a big sort of, game changer. So.
Yeah. How many games have you done so far?
Launched or built?
Let's say commercially available.
Commercially available, there are 5. We have, I think, 12 more that are up on our itch page that are just little jam games we made, and then there's a graveyard in our Dropbox.
We've got probably about 150 game projects in there.
There's very terrible.
We have a saying that there's no such thing as the back burner. There's just an incinerator. So if you haven't heard, well, like, oh, I'm going to work on this project later. Nah, we'll just burn it down.
Well, that sounds actually very sound. Anyone got a question? No, everyone's still very shy. Okay, we've got a question here. Can you hear Fred?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, somewhat.
Remember Fred?
Yeah, is there where is there where you record your podcast?
Yes, we're in the podcast dungeon. This is a moving blanket stapled to the ceiling.
So professional.
Wait a moment, did you do the voice for the trailer?
Yeah, that was my voice, yeah.
Because the voice you just did right now sounded exactly like the voice on the trailer.
Yep, that was it.
That's awesome. That's one of the most awesomest trailers I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Okay, so regarding tools, so you said you started with GameMaker, right? And presently, what are you using?
Still GameMaker. We used Unity when we were working at the that larger game studio for a while, and 3D is fantastic and offers a lot of really great benefits. But the extra D just takes a lot of extra work. So we go.
No thanks.
Yes, we like 2D, and also Sam. So we use a program called Inkscape to do all of our art, which is a free vector graphics program, kind of like Adobe Illustrator, and except it's free and better.
Yes.
So it's sort of
better in every single way.
And it's open source, so we can also develop ways to augment that tool and stuff like that. So yeah, we just try to get a lot of mileage out of the stuff that we use. And then we also believe that GameMaker is hands down the best tool for 2D game development, because that's what it's designed for. Whereas Unity is a lot more cumbersome to execute the same kinds of things.
Okay. And have you tried GameMaker too?
Yep.
We're
fully switched over. We now have to migrate our old portfolio over to it, which is going to be
pain.
It's gonna be a fun time.
Any questions? Go, shoot.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, but I'll try to speak louder.
I can repeat also.
Oh,
Yeah.
He's gonna do the repeating voice. It's fine.
Go.
So my question is basically, you mentioned that you have like 100 and something games in the incinerator. How do you decide what goes into the incinerator? You know, like you have put so much effort into a game, you might like it, but how did you tell? How can you say to yourself like, man, this sucks. I'm just not gonna play this anymore. I'm just tossing that out of it.
You heard everything?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think. So just to repeat the question, it's how do you decide what gets incinerated?
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, I don't know if is it like a conscious decision you make, or is it just sort of we want to do something else?
Yeah, I mean it's just whatever project we're working on that we definitely just feel kind of excited about, because we have a philosophy that there's no such thing as a good game idea. There's only a good execution of a game idea, and so you could come up with what sounds like the most amazing game in the world, but just because you've only been making games for like 6 months, your version of that game is going to be very different than Activision's version of that same game, right? And so it really just comes down to when we're in the midst of working on a game, if it's clearly just kind of clicking and it's something that it seems like we are definitely going to be able to execute really well based on the kinds of games that we like and based on the things that we're good at, then we just keep going. So it's kind of like a relationship where if it's hard, then you're doing it wrong, right? So it should be that working on the game itself is just really enjoyable, and that it clearly just feels right. It's kind of a wishy-washy answer, probably, but.
So you have never, stopped working on a project that you feel like you like a lot, so you never taken, the course of action of saying like this game is awesome, but you know what, we're not gonna make it. We should work on something else.
Yeah, so that actually the first game I ever I worked on it for a whole year, which I would recommend anybody who's still kind of in their early stages, who's still learning. Don't do that. Just stick with small games at the beginning, because it really is the case that if you fall in love with an idea and it's obvious that you don't have what it takes to execute it, you can work on it for a long time, and oftentimes the game just gets worse and worse and worse. And that's actually what happened with mine. Was I kept adding stuff, thinking that it was just missing something, and everything I added just kept ruining the game more and more. Eventually, it was just a pile of memory leaks and crashes and bugs and just terrible mechanics. And then after a year, I just had to burn it down and start over. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely the case that you'll be working on something that you really think has promise, but you just aren't there yet in terms of bringing that idea into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So a question people had was regarding, so how did the documentary come about? What's the story behind that?
Oh, yeah, so...
I know it, but did you think, explain to the guys?
Yeah, there was a documentary crew in our city who were looking around to do little profiles on a couple of different game devs in our city, because our city has basically just as of the last, 5 years or so, kind of actually been growing a games industry. And so there's only a few of us who are actually doing this stuff full time, and this documentary crew kind of caught whiff of that, and so they wanted to kind of go around. They're just doing little 5-minute spots with all these different studios. So they came by to visit Seth and I, and we ended up chatting for, I think, 7 hours, because we were very talkative people, and then told them the whole story about how we got to where we were, and with Crashlands, which Crashlands actually came out of myself getting a cancer diagnosis back in late 2013. So shortly after that second game that Seth had mentioned earlier, the freemium game that finally was bringing us in, a tiny bit of money, I started getting really, really sick and couldn't quite figure out what was going on. I was just really tired and exhausted, and found out, luckily, just in the nick of time, that I'd developed a really, really rare form of lymphoma, cancer of the lymph system. And so we went into a sort of a completely different operational mode. Whereas before it was more about trying to make a game that was sort of market feasible, and freemium was sort of where we were heading with it. And then after I got cancer, I was like, I already have cancer. Why would I want to make a freemium game? And so I turned around and we decided to make basically the biggest thing that we could possibly try to pull off. And the goal was to essentially say, what is the game that I would want to make before I was dead, and then let's go build that. And so, of course, the documentary crew heard the story, and they were like, oh, shit. We heard them walking down the stairs, and one of them was like, we found the story, guys. They just started doing their film thing as well. And they came around a couple of months before launch. And so it was right before the beta of Crashlands, which, of course, had been in works for a year and a half at that point. It was also just before I would be getting my first cancer scan after having all my treatments. So there was some natural potential drama in there. So they just hung out for the whole thing and put the story together. And then I think Devolver Digital picked it up for their films wing, and have been kind of publishing it around and stuff. So that's been a really interesting, it's been a really cool relationship and a really interesting archive to have, because we forget basically everything that's ever happened very rapidly. We're like goldfish, so it's nice to see that there's a film of history of what we went through, and that we can reference in the future.
And for reference, you're better now, right?
Yeah, I'm better. I'm good. It took a while, but I'm good.
Any questions, guys? Still feeling shy? No one has a question, not a single one. Okay. I'll ask one. Butterscotch Shenanigans. Okay, first of all, why? And second, is there any relationship with the movie Princess Bride?
No relation.
No relation.
Well, this actually kind of goes toward a deeper marketing question.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, go.
Yep. So it really just came down to we didn't know we were going to make games yet, but we wanted to do something, and we needed a company name. So we needed something that was a memorable combination of words that definitely you wouldn't find in any other context, which I think we got it.
Mm-hmm.
But we do actually talk to a lot of other studios about their names, because there's a lot of new studios popping up in St. Louis. Some of you guys are probably forming studios as well. And there's a couple, golden rules that people don't really think about. And, one is it has to be memorable. It has to be Googleable. And it also needs to be something that you don't have to explain in terms of so if we tell you, our company's called Butterscotch Shenanigans, then that's a thing that you now can remember and look up. But if you made your name out of a pun or like an intentional misspelling, so one of the games that we worked on was called One Epic Night, which is night with a K, K-N-I-G-H-T, like a fighter.
Yeah.
And
one, but spelled out as the word.
The word one, yeah. So anytime we would try to tell people about this game, we would then have to explain the title of the game so that they could look it up. So really, there's unfortunately not any kind of this didn't really come from anything. It was just a pair of words that seemed to be ridiculous and meet all of our other sort of marketing criteria. So that's it.
Fred, maybe we're thinking right with our name also, maybe. Okay, so let's go back maybe a little bit, unless someone has a question. No? No?
We're very stupid.
Okay.
Look at this weird light
Oh,
we have.
questions! Thank you.
Our community, there's a lot of fandoms and we tend to have to choose them. Can you market the Shenanigans Jam to us, and why is yours better than all the others?
Well,
what's the question?
The question was, they do a lot of game jams.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a game jam.
We do.
So why should they do our game jam?
Mm-hmm.
I think you should hire Fred as a marketing guy. He's talking about your
Exactly.
jam, your podcast, I think.
Well, obviously, we don't need to hire him because he's already
in.
Keep doing it for free. Good job, Fred.
Yeah, so we think jams are kind of our lifeblood. Like all of our games, aside from Crashlands, actually, all of our games have come out of jams, and that's how we prefer to work, because the constraints just help kind of keep everything in scope and do wonders for us. So we did start our own called the Shenanigans Jam, which we had about a month ago, an online jam. And obviously the reason why you should do ours in the future is because we jam also alongside everybody else. And so at the end we do like a burn down list of all the top games that come out of it and put it up on our YouTube channel and all that stuff. But it's about embracing the process more so than the outcome, which I'm sure any of you who have jammed fully understand. It's just a lot of fun to throw all those ideas together over the course of a few days and see what hits the wall well.
Yeah, but truly, you should just do every jam, and our jam is one of those.
We're jamming right now, actually, with our feet.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Yeah, simple question. Why games?
Is that a simple question, though? Is it? Man, you guys are throwing some hardballs. Why games? Why, Seth? Why are we doing this? Why are we here?
I don't know why anybody else is doing it, but as far as I'm concerned, when I was growing up, or I guess for the three of us brothers, we didn't have video games growing up. We were not really allowed video games, so obviously that pendulum swung the other direction. But there was always something kind of remarkable about games over books or movies that I can never quite put my finger on. But even to this day, I'll hear a soundtrack from a game that I grew up playing, and just the amount of, emotion that kind of gets packed into that is incredible. And I think games they're really interesting to work on. They're hard to make. They're hard to market. There's always an endless pile of challenges because they combine storytelling, music, engineering, art, animation, like any discipline you can conceive of goes into games. And so in a way, I think it's probably one of the hardest things a person can try to master. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just a really fun thing to work on, and you get to create those experiences for people. There's just no real downside, other than the poverty stuff. Yeah.
Oh my God. More questions? We've got another question.
I have another question. You mentioned you went into the game industry and you were already on a big company. So what made you decide to say, like, fuck it, we're making our own game company because we're already in the industry? Like a lot of people, kind of a struggle to get in. You were already in and you basically said, like, fuck it, we're doing it our way. So what made you decide that? What made you drag you to go that way?
Yeah, I think it's always a good mix of what you need to start something, which is ignorance and a little bit of arrogance, I think, where we basically, we were in this larger studio, and it took them like a year to make an infinite runner, a 3D infinite runner. Not a big project by any stretch. It just took forever. And
everything is just meetings all day, every day, right? Because you got 20, 30 people on a team. Everybody's got to just be syncing up all the time.
So, yeah, we got tired of how slow it was, I think. And that's not to say that there weren't plenty of benefits of being there. I think I become a producer on a multi-million-dollar space MMO, I think a month before we were like, yeah, fuck this, we're out. So there was certainly, we weren't stifled in terms of opportunity, and we certainly weren't stifled in terms of interesting work to do. I think it was just that the way that the work was being done organizationally, I think we didn't quite jive with the mode of that organization, which was a bit slower and much more top-down than the way that we like to work. So we kind of sat back and we were like, I think we can do this faster and better. So we have.
We were wrong at first,
but now we're correct.
Now we're correct.
Took 5 years.
Yeah.
It's a common story, right, about people going into, especially in the AAA industry, then coming out and going into indie. Do you think it's it's a good advice to actually advise people to do that kind of thing? Let's say you're a student, you're coming out of college or something, you want to do games, you've done your own stuff, as a game jams, but you get into the AAA first to get some experience. Do you think that's a wise advice? Do you feel that it helped you?
I definitely think it helped us. I mean, I think if anything, it's kind of like doing contract work, right? If you do contract work that is in a field that you're interested in, then someone else is just paying for you to educate yourself, and that's fantastic. So I think that's kind of the way that we have sort of looked back on that time, is that it wasn't a great experience in the sort of how I would rate my experiences sort of things, but it was a really good thing to have done, because it taught us a lot. Actually, in that particular case, taught us a lot more about how we did not necessarily want to run our business or whatever else, that I think if we had just started one without having at least a little bit of insider knowledge, or having seen some of the processes that didn't work, I think we probably would have hit a lot of the same pitfalls. We certainly wouldn't have known as much about what we wanted to do, and it was nice to learn that while someone else paid us to be alive.
Yeah, we also made a lot of contacts. So the person who we now commissioned to do our box art for all of our games was one of our coworkers at that studio. So he's no longer there, we're no longer there, but now we have a working relationship, which is really good. So, yeah. there's all kinds of benefits to be gained from it.
Yeah, I would say just make sure you don't stay too long, because
You'll get comfortable.
well, you'll either get comfortable or your soul may be destroyed. So you gotta be, it's a tricky balance. You gotta exit at the right time. Get the knowledge, don't die, don't become a burned out husk of a person.
Make it out.
I will take that into advice. Any more questions? Oh, go, shoot.
Did the development of Crashlands change you as a person, and if so, how?
Did you hear that?
Did the development of Crashlands change us as people, and if so, how?
Exactly.
All right, cool.
I think everything should change you as a person.
What?
Yeah. Otherwise, what are you doing? I mean, everything you do, you should be constantly trying to gain new lessons from it. And so with Crashlands, we advanced our technical skills dramatically. We made a lot more contacts. We had to rethink basically everything about the way we thought about marketing, about business, about our processes and everything. And also we expanded our team in the middle of Crashlands. So at first it was just Sam and me, and then our third brother, Adam, joined after the first 6 months, so we had to learn about all that stuff. And so, yeah, man, we learned an incredible amount of things. It was a 2-year project, and yeah, we totally came out different on the other side.
Yeah, and I think just from an overall approach standpoint, that game was made just in response to the shit that we were dealing with at the time, and I think having that thing to focus on, and that huge project to just pour a lot of energy into during a crisis time that lasted, as long as the development did, was a lesson in and of itself in terms of focus, which is when you're dealing with a bunch of shit, or when you're dealing with a breakup or health issues or whatever else, one of the best things to have alongside you is a project to work on. Doing the work in a lot of ways, I think, helped both of us, the whole family, actually get through all of that stuff. And I think Crashlands by itself transformed our understanding of what we could probably actually accomplish in the market as well, because everyone had told us that premium was dead on mobile, which I'm sure you guys have heard every day.
Apparently it dies about every week.
Yeah, so people just keep saying this. And we launched a premium game on mobile and did great. So we learned quite a bit of stuff.
People are idiots. They turn.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't listen to them.
You have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, was it actually quite scary moving out of the actual company and going into your own sort of, because I'm an exchange student, I was like, coming to Lisbon, I was like, oh no, I'm going to die, but I'm the person now. So I was thinking if it was similar for you, like, was it scary at first and then it got better, or?
Oh yeah. It gets better and then it gets worse, and then it gets better again, and then probably a lot worse at some point, and then much better after that. Yeah. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride. I think leaving that studio was one of the most freeing feelings we had, and then immediately, of course, the problem with freedom is that you have to make all these decisions about stuff all of a sudden, and so you're like, shit.
now you're responsible for your own sadness or happiness.
So it actually took us about 6 weeks or so once we had left that studio to feel like we were really rocking. And then, truthfully, it took us, I think, 6 full months of work together until after that second game launch, before we really felt like we had a handle on what we were doing. And that's including launching 2 games, right? So we weren't working on the same game. It was going through the process of building and launching 2 separate games, doing the marketing, all this stuff, before we said, I think we have a strong enough handle on how all of this works to eke out a living first here. So it does take a while, and there's always some scary stuff that happens, but I think once you're able to get your toehold and get some expertise in saying, I understand how the space works, then it becomes a lot easier. So the first 6 weeks are probably chaos, The first 6 months are moderately useful, if medium, and then after that it should be gravy, I think.
Using that question earlier about how Crashlands changed you, what about the effects of Crashlands? Because remember we were speaking, you told me, like, for instance, your podcast went from, a few listeners to suddenly a bunch of them. You got more known, you got into news places, there were articles, you got prizes. How was that, dealing with that? Because, a lot of people just think the positive side of that, but in general.
I think, there's it's been weird. And I just, in a really odd sense, because, so when it comes to, for example, like we were able to give a talk at GDC this year, which was a Crashlands postmortem, and then we gave another one, the business track about sort of our studio.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we've been pitching literally like the exact same talks to GDC for, 4 years, and they've just been like, nah, we don't care, it's fine, stop asking, So we're not saying anything new, it's just that suddenly, because we were able to put together a competent game and ship it excellently, people are more willing to actually pay attention to what we're saying. And I think that's been the weirdest part of it, because we actually don't feel particularly different about what we're doing nowadays. I know some people, like, the awards go to their heads, but we generally get confused when we get one. I remember we had an intern, or we had an art hire who was interviewing here during the day when we got the DICE nomination.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, holy shit, you guys just got a DICE nomination." And I almost deleted the email, because I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't understand. And so I don't know, like we've never been much for awards, I guess. And so we view them as useful tools. And what I mean by that, in the same way that the success of Crashlands has been a useful tool to make people understand that we're not just spouting off a bunch of nonsense about games, or about, how to do your work, or about process and that sort of thing. They sort of act as these credibility boosters that make people actually pay attention. So I think in that regard, the awards have been really nice for that, which is, now when we write into press or something like that, we can say, hey, we're making this game, and previously we made this DICE nominated game called Crashlands, you might have heard of. And that's handy, but beyond them being sort of tools, I don't think the success hasn't really changed our approach too much, thankfully.
Well, there has been, I think, one important thing, which is something that you never really hear people talk about, is what happens after the launch, sort of internally. Because people always talk about the marketing leading up to the launch, people talk about all of the work and all the process and all the design decisions that went into it. And so as early developers, we're all trained to always be looking forward to that day, right? And like, once the launch happens, then everything's great, right? Because you're done, you did it now, and now you just retire or something. I don't know. And so we launched Crashlands. It brought in enough money that we were able to pay ourselves back and start thinking about hiring people and expanding the studio. But it also brought with it an incredible amount of customer support. So it was about 6 weeks of just answering emails and doing support requests and bug fixes and patching and stuff. And once we dug out from that hole, we had a bunch of new opportunities to bring the game to new markets, to new platforms, and we just didn't have the capacity to do that. So we hired some people. But then now we're training people. We've never done that before, right? And so it was really just a matter of, like, 2016 we launched Crashlands in January, and looking back on it, even though we were working our asses off the whole time, it was very different than it was before, which is before we were always just working toward the launch, and now the game's out. So all through 2016, it was just about figuring out how to beat business, how to have this game out there that people are playing, and how to support that game and keep it patched and keep it up to date.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it was actually kind of like refactoring, right? Like, you're like, oh, hang on, I need to take like 6 days to make everything be the same.
Right.
So that's what we did last year, basically. So it was a year of sort of like reworking all of our systems and figuring out how to grow the business and think about stuff. And it honestly feels really weird to look back on because we've been so, I mean, we truly were in survival mode for, 3 years. And so pumping out 5 different games and launching them, like we always had a game that was in the works. And then last year we were just sort of like doing other stuff. It was fucking weird. And that was just a lot to handle. So yeah, if anybody ever is leading up to a launch, feel free to reach out about what to do afterward, because
it's just a whole different
ball game.
And people just don't really talk about what happens. There's just not much information out there.
Yeah, that's true. So you're working on something else then? Are you?
Yeah.
Anything about that?
What's that?
And can you say anything about that?
Yeah, so we actually, speaking of putting games on the back burner, so we had, in January, we started making a gigantic game that was going to have an online multiplayer component, sort of, I guess, Diablo meets Stardew Valley sort of a situation.
Oh my god.
And I mean, and it's good. It works. It's playable, but we were looking at it, we're like, there's a lot of tech stuff in here that if our first go at like multiplayer, for example, is with a game that we had to spend 2 years building because it's so damn huge, that's a terrible idea. That's risking the whole farm on this one thing. So we backed up and we said, okay, can we build essentially like a smaller version of this or something like that? And so we revisited one of our games from a game jam called Narwhal Online, which is built as a massively single-player online role-playing game where your individual progress gets sort of like uploaded to the cloud, and then everyone's collecting a resource. It's kind of like the war effort in World of Warcraft, if anyone remembers the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj.
2005.
So the community would pool together resources, and then as the community hit certain tiers, then it would unlock new levels of content. And we already jammed this thing out, and it was actually really fun. So we came back to that, we started working on that. And then we did the Shenanigans Jam last month, and we made a card game that's kind of like
Hearthstone mixed with Angry Birds?
Yeah. And so we made that in 2 days, and it was really fun. And we made an online component for it, because the idea was we wanted to figure out how can we get like sort of a toehold on this online problem. And so instead of doing real-time multiplayer, which is a pain in the ass, and we don't know how to do, we wanted to back it up and say, how can we do like sort of async multiplayer? So this game is a card game. You throw hammers at each other. And we built that in 2 days, and then we had so much fun building it. And we saw the potential immediately in it. And now it's growing. It's been 14 days, I think. We were not 17 days? 21 days, as of today.
It's really
going along. And it's sort of grown into, we've added to that list of 2 games, Pokemon as well. So it's like a monster collection game, and you battle with them and deploy them on the field, and then you hit each other in the face with hammers. So we've been about 3 weeks into that thing, and it's coming along really well. So we're really excited about it, and it's going to be hard to figure out how to explain it to people, I think. But that's the only trouble we're going to be having at the end of the day. So yeah, we're all in on this current project, and this looks like it's definitely the one that's going to be the next thing for us.
Cool. Okay, so we're about the time that we spoke about together, but if you're good to go and if anyone still has a question, how do you feel? You want to go a little bit longer, or do you want to stay here?
Oh yeah, we can go.
We're good.
You're good?
Hit me with a question. It's 2:30 p.m. over here, so we got like 7 hours.
Yeah.
So whatever you guys need.
Well, we will need to go to dinner. Just saying, but it's still life. So. Does anyone have further questions? Yeah, go, shoot.
When you were starting out, what were your most memorable fuck-ups?
Okay, so probably our first one. Really, we've always fucked up marketing, which I think just sort of in different ways. In our first game we made, we spent a lot of time reading Gama Sutra with a G, not the other.
Not the good one.
So we spent a lot of time reading Gama Sutra, and there's a lot of industry veterans on there writing articles about talking about things like how premium is dead, or lamenting free to play, citing their own stories, and then explaining what other people should be doing based on something that they did. And we read this stuff religiously, and we made most of our marketing decisions for our first game based on that. And it turned out to just be a complete disaster. Our thing was basically, we were just starting out. We didn't quite know how to make a really well-balanced, fine-tuned, highly polished game. We could make a pretty good game, but not like a really good game. And we launched it for $3 on mobile. But we didn't understand things like how to get featured on the storefront. And we didn't understand how to make a good trailer. And basically all these different things that go into convincing somebody that your game is worth a few bucks, especially on mobile where people are very stingy, parting with their cash. So we launched that game for $2.99, and it made like $1,500 over several months, which it's better than the average mobile game actually, but it wasn't enough to cover all. That?
I would be happy.
Yeah, but I mean, we spent 3 months working on it, so we definitely lost, almost $10,000 on it probably.
Yeah, I think. Do you want like a recent fuck up?
Basically, every day is just a series of fuck ups.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of our mantra. I feel like reading like a nice cursive script on the wall that says like always be fucking up.
Yeah,
it's like what happens. But a good recent one. I had two good reasons. So one was my fault. I'll talk about it first. So we had our Steam sale, and you set your percentage off, right? So our game is $14.99, and I was like, cool, we're gonna put it up for 33% off. Get in that $10 and under bucket. People buy games like crazy. So I put 33% in. Didn't actually do the math. By the way, doesn't quite end up being under $10. It was like 10.01 or something because of their rounding. So we didn't get in the bucket for the under $10 tier, which ended up probably cost us thousands of dollars. So that happened recently. And then we have our own proprietary login system that we built called Butterscotch ID, so people can get accounts with us. And I think one of my favorite things was we send out newsletters about every like 4 to 8 weeks or so. And our brother Adam was the one who put the system together. And we designed the system that would just take care of this problem of like who do you send emails to. So what it does is it just looks and says, if they opened a previous email, they're guaranteed to get the next one. If they didn't, they have a 50% chance to get the next one, etc. And so it just kind of keeps on probabilistically rolling them down. Now the problem was Adam forgot to set it so that they would actually go back up to 1
if they ever
open an email. So over the course of 4 months, we went from sending out over 200,000 emails per newsletter to sending out like 50,000. And we were like, what is happening here?
Our volume just keeps going down.
And it's because Adam secretly broke everything for like 4 months. So who knows what that did?
But I think the important thing to remember is, you're gonna screw things up, and I think the longer you're at it and the better you do, the more fans you have, the more expensive those mistakes get. But they're just lessons, right? So it's just all about trying to always be reflective and always be thinking about why things happened the way that they did, and just come to the best conclusions that you can.
That sounds very wise. Question? Yeah, sure.
Do you think publishers are important? And if so, do you have any advice on working with publishers?
Mm-hmm.
They can be. Yeah. So do we think publishers are important?
Right.
And if so, how do you get one?
More about how do you deal with them? Was that?
How do you deal with them?
How do you deal with them?
He's saying a role of both. He wants to.
Let's see. So the only experience that we've had with a publisher, so we've self-published all of our stuff, and we were approached a few times while we were in the middle of Crashlands after we would get press rounds. We were often approached by publishers asking if we wanted them to partner up, and we always ask the question, what are you going to offer? And if all they can offer is saying that they're going to give you marketing support, then no, absolutely not. From what we've seen, there's a huge number of publishers who basically they will give you marketing support, but you get treated as if you are one of many stocks in their inventory, and so you don't necessarily get sort of full bore, like someone's passionate attempt at selling the shit out of your game. However, there are other publishers that, especially if they're willing to put money down to help fund development, that's always a good sign that they're actually legit and really willing to play ball. And of course, negotiating those rates is always something that you should do. So if they just give you a rate, they're like, all right, so we're going to do this, and this for you, and in exchange you're going to give us 70%. You should be like, nah, how about less than that, and pick a number. Because the trick is never take the first blush thing, even if it's the case they come back and they're like, oh, actually that's a hard 70%. We are not doing the deal unless you give in to that. At least try, you try to do something.
I think there's another thing that people often overlook is that the publisher is equally dependent on you as you are on them, right? It's supposed to be a two-way relationship, and publishers are supposed to oftentimes be money of the operation, right? Especially if you're an indie, the assumption is that as an independent developer, you are probably eating beans out of a can every day, or ramen noodles, and sleeping on the ground, and you just don't have much, you don't have much runway, right? And you're scrimping and saving, and even $10,000 would be just an unbelievable windfall and would allow you to just do so much more with the game, right? And so a good publisher is one who's willing to put money down, where when you start off the publisher relationship, they'll say, hey, we will provide you with this amount of funding to finish the game, and then another, certain amount based on different milestones. And they should be a partner in the relationship of making the game. So you should be able to send them copies of the game, get feedback, have them help you with testing. They need to be invested, right? So if they just show up when your game is done and you're a week away from launch, and they go, hey, how about you just give us most of your money and we'll help you market it, just run the other way, because they're not going to do anything.
Any more questions? Okay. Two.
Everybody said that you should make significant family. How does that work out for you guys?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. He asked, everyone normally says that they shouldn't mix business with family. And how does that work for you guys?
I think you shouldn't mix business with bad relationships. And most people have bad relationships in their families.
Yeah. Let's not conflate the two.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we found it really useful because all of us are very good at talking to each other and very good at arguing with each other. We argue basically constantly. In fact, we had a 2-hour lunch meeting today where we argued for 2 hours.
Constructively,
because we're adults and we know how to fucking communicate at this point in our lives. So I think the important thing is that whether it's just a business partner, whoever your business partner is, if they're bad at communicating, either get them some books about how to listen and how to talk, or get a new business partner, because that is the absolutely the underlying thing that goes through the whole thing. When the joke we have now is that the first time that anybody in the studio sees a new thing that anybody else is working on, the response almost invariably is, "Oh, that shit's broke," because the new person sees everything that's wrong with the thing that you've been, whacking away on for hours. And if you can't have a constructive conversation, like just immediately on first blush with someone who's like, "Oh, sorry, after 3 weeks of you working on this new web tool, I sat down and broke it immediately." If you can't have a really good conversation about that, then you got problems. So I think, we found it super fantastic, but I think it's just because all of us are good at navigating sort of, communication and relationship issues. So we never let anything fester. So if I got a problem with Seth, I'm like, "Hey, I got a problem." It's weird. It's weird how that works very well for solving things. So that's how we take care of things, and I think having some family bonds helps as far as thinking about buy-in. Like none of us are gonna just up and bounce for no reason because we're also related. So it's kind of easier to. We're all in this sinking ship together. We're trapped.
It's not very common to have 3 brothers all working in the same area and together, right? So it's not that.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
Yeah. What do your parents think of that?
I think
They're cool with it now.
Yeah, they weren't cool with it at first. We weren't really allowed to play games growing up, and so I think they were probably a little horrified at first. But I think it was mainly about the risk, right? Because they were like, "Oh my God, my kid's going to be a starving indie," which I guess is like the new starving artist, the new cool thing to be. Eating beans and just dying for no reason.
They weren't wrong, but we had a plan.
Yeah.
So
my favorite thing is we went into our. So we're in the Midwest, and there's just not much of a games industry here, and so Seth found an accountant to do our books, like for the $3 that we earned for the first year that we were in operation. And he went in to chat with her, and she's like, "So what do you do?" He's like, "Okay, so I run a game studio." And she's like, "Okay, so what's your cash flow?" He's like, "Basically nothing right now, but we need a plan because I'm pretty sure in about 3 years we're going to get just a shitload of money. We need to know what to do with it." And she was like, "Ah, you're so funny." And then, sure enough, there it was. So it just takes for fucking ever. And so I think our family was really, really. They're worried in the way that parents are always worried for you, which is, I think the saying is, parents want what's good for you, not what's best for you. So that's kind of how we think about it, where they were, but now they're in a good place. So, yeah.
Awesome. George, you have a question?
So my artist associates asked a very simple question, and that is, if it is okay, if we ever want to make a reference, to put in this box in one of our games.
Do what?
Do what?
To Crashlands chapters.
Wait, repeat it? I don't know if I heard. Yeah, repeat it.
I'll read it. Where is that? Oh my God. If it's okay if I ever want to make a reference to Flux and Juicebox in one of our games.
Yeah.
Just send us an email. Yeah.
Let's do it.
If you feel like you're on questionable legal grounds, just send us an email.
Wasn't expecting that. Okay, so we're way over the time, but you guys feel good? Let's wrap it up. Unless someone really has a question really wants to ask. No?
Last call.
Last call.
I have a question. You mentioned that you didn't really play games when you were kids. You studied history and law and psychology. So this is a very unique background for a game developer. How do you feel this affects the way you make games and the games you make, if at all? Or it's like, I wish I could just make this, it would be better by now.
Yeah, I think, so to recap the question, I think it's a question of how does the strange background of not really having played games affect and influence the way we make them.
Also your what you studied, the fact that it's not
Law.
Right. I think it goes back to kind of what Seth was saying earlier about how the truth is that game development is really the intersection of basically every single discipline. So even if you're trained in, if you're trained in anything and just how to think about stuff, I think you'll find that there's always weird intersections with whatever your particular domain of knowledge is and the space of making games. So in the case of psychology turned out to be massively useful when it came to making games, and also to thinking about how to sell them or thinking about how to pitch to iTunes or anybody else. So not in the ways that we would have thought in terms of making the actual game product, but I think we've done that through sort of brute force and through feel as we've gotten better at the particular skills of art and programming in our cases. So the background education has provided a good sort of solid layer that gave us extra tools to analyze the situations that we were put in as a business, I think, in particular.
And one thing I love about games is that as a game developer, you don't get to hate things. So you ever meet somebody who's like, I hate drawing. I'm a terrible artist and I hate it and I don't want to think about it, right? Well, if you're going to be making games, especially on a very small team, guess what? You're going to have to learn to love drawing because you're going to need to be able to talk to artists about the things that they're doing. You need to provide feedback. You need to learn about color theory and silhouettes and all these different things. Because otherwise you're just a useless lump, right? You're just a sort of like programming in-out machine where people just throw problems at you and you just spit out, stuff. It's not quite where it needs to be because you don't know enough about everything else, but maybe it'll get the job done. And so it's a domain where any type of knowledge can become incredibly useful if you apply it well. Actually, my background so I only was in law school for a little while, then I dropped out to make games. But I took intellectual property courses, which have become incredibly helpful. And then prior to that, I was economics and finance student. So learning about growth models and statistics and all of the advanced math that goes into that kind of stuff has actually made it really, really easy for us to come up with models for how to balance game concepts. So in Crashlands, we had about 530 something recipes by the time the game launched, and those recipes are all algorithmically generated so that we don't have to manually change the values of what goes into those recipes. And so having a background in economics and stuff like that has been really helpful for just kind of thinking about those complex problems. So if you're hungry for knowledge, then you will do really well in games.
Okay, since that will wrap it up. Guys, so it's not Mervyn speaking. Hey! Thanks so much again for accepting this. I hope
thanks for the invite.
Still early over there. We're going to have dinner here. We'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
No, thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah. Good night.